Okay. Okay. We estimate the number of TextMesh Pro users to be around 200,000 for about 5 million Unity users. We then assume there's a lot of people out there which are probably not using the best text solution they could for their project. So we want to improve that today. So my name is Benoit. I'm a technical product manager at Unity. And today I want to talk about why you should consider TextMesh Pro for your next project. Before talking about TextMesh Pro, though, let's step back to understand what problem it's trying to solve. Text is a key component that a lot of projects tend to overlook, and yet it's probably the one which users are the most exposed to. So why not make sure it looks as good as it could? Also, in order to increase the chances of your product to be successful, it should aim at reaching a maximum of users. This means that sooner or later, you'll have to deal with complex requirements such as supporting multiple screen resolutions and making your app available as many languages as possible. And those could be hard problems if you don't have a solid text solution in your place. The bad news is, if you're working with text in Unity, whether you're using 3D text or UI text, you'll quickly run into some limitations. For one, they're using Bitmap Fonts, which need to be rasterized at a certain point size, meaning if you want to reuse it at a different size, let's say for a title, it has to scale, it gets blurry, it doesn't look very good. To fix this, you have to create an extra font at the required point size. But because Bitmap Fonts, the atlas needs to contain a representation of each glyph at every point size. So that ends up taking a lot of resources in your project and possibly increase memory consumption. Secondly, there's not many styling options available out of the box. There's only outline and shadow. And in order to render the effect, they need to create extra geometry. So depending on how you combine them, you could be doubling, tripling, or even quadrupling the number of quads per character. To work around that, you could bring your atlas in an external image authoring tool. And then you can make your own visual improvement. It's a slow workflow. You go doing back and forth between Unity and your editing tool. And you have the same problem as before. You're adding even more resources to your project. So it feels like you're trading off performance versus memory consumption. There's no clear solution for you. And finally, there's very few options available to format and lay out your text. Now, the good news, TextMesh Pro can help you. TextMesh Pro is an asset store plugin, which Unity acquired in 2017. And it's basically a replacement for those text components we just talked about, the 3D text and UI text. TextMesh Pro is pretty awesome at two things. Well, first, it's using an advanced rendering technique called sign distance field. It can render clean and beautiful text at any point size and any resolution. Second, it comes with a ton of options, giving you control, total control on how you want your style, format, and lay out your text in Unity. And the beauty of it, regardless of how many point size or how many styles you have in your project, it only requires one asset per font, so it's very efficient. Let me show you some of the features TextMesh Pro has to offer. All right. So here I have two text fields. One of them is Unity, and the other one is not. They look pretty similar from here, but if I zoom in, hope you all see, all right. You can clearly see the bitmap font is still a bit mushy and blurry, and while the SDF, the sign distance field, SDF for short, it stays clear and sharp, even if I zoom in very close or far. I can add styles to both of those text fields. For example, I can add an outline and a shadow. Same for TextMesh Pro, like this. So I can achieve the same result, but if we look at the wireframe, though, I'll zoom in a bit so we can see clearly. The bitmap font is using a lot of polygons to render the effects, and TextMesh Pro is only using one quad per character. And this is because TextMesh Pro is using material properties to render the effect. And there's a lot of them, and you have control over them. You can change colors, sizes, you can add textures to them. You have full control. And we save all those material properties in what we call material presets. You can have many of them. Actually, you can have as many as you need in your project. There's no actual limits. And they're very easy to switch to. So here, for example, I have a more complex material. I can see there's some glow, there's even some bevel, sorry. And you see, it's still taking only 1 quad per character. So it's very efficient for small devices like mobile, for example. I can also show you an example for more capable devices. Here, if I look at this. So this is a much more advanced material, a shader, actually. It's a surface shader. And as you can see, it can show bump map, glow. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. It supports dynamic surface lighting, so it reacts very well to the multiple lights in my scene. And even though it's a 3D text object, I have access to all the same options of UI text. It's also dynamically generated, so you could have localized text right in your game. But what's the point of having great-looking text if you have no control over it? Thankfully, TextMesh Pro got you covered here as well. Give me a second. Here we are. So when dealing with larger blocks of text, it's important to be able to control layout and format to increase readability. Again, let's start by comparing what Unity Text has to offer. There's a few options. It's nice. You can do the basic stuff like alignment and have some font style. But if we look at TextMesh Pro, there's much more. Of course, we can do the same, bold, italic, but we can even do underline, strike through, and have lower cases, upper cases, and even small caps. Also have the expected alignment you would expect from it. But also have justified and flush. And you can even control how the spacing will occur between those by either setting to a word or character spacing or anything in between. So you really have full control on how you render and lay out your text. But all you see in here, I'm setting the style and formatting for an entire text object. But it's also possible to change only a subset of it. And this is done using rich text tags. Let me show you. Here we are. So through rich text tags, you have access to pretty much all the same basic styles, like bold, italics, and underline. But you also have superscript and subscript, which are very useful to display mathematic formulas, for example. And you also have text highlighting. And here's some other example of things you can do with rich text tags. You have control over character spacing and line height. And most of the values for those text tags can be set with either absolute values or relative values like percentage and M. Even more examples of what you can do with rich text tags. Rich text tags, we need to change that. So here I'm using indent tag with combination of sprite, and I'm simulating a custom bullet list. You can embed indent tags into other indent tags to have multiple levels of indentation. And let me show you. And this is all done dynamically, so it responds to any layout changes I do to my text. And finally, another example of rich text tags to set multiple alignments within the same text object. So if I select this, you can see this is one huge block of text, but I have center, left, right, and even justified alignments within the same text. And you can also have access to what we call custom tags. So you can save a combination of styles in order to be able to reuse them more easily. We call them custom styles, and then define in what TextMesh Pro style sheets. If I open this, you can define your opening tags, your closing tags, and give them a name to which would be referenced in your text. For example, at the bottom you see there's a quote. It's using this guy here. It's a quote tag. So you can see I set italic, I changed the size, and I changed the margin. So it's a very convenient feature. But there's some options you want to apply to all of the text controls in your project. So here we're looking at an actual font size, a font asset. As usual, there's a lot of settings you can control. For example, I can change the line height, and it will be shown in real time. You can also set the bold weight or the italic style slant, and this will apply to every usage of every instance of text control using that font in your project. And this is where you can also set what we call a fallback font. A fallback fonts are other font assets that you can reference here, which TextMesh Pro will recursively search to find missing characters in this current font. So for example, this is very useful if you prefer a certain subset on a font to another. So you could have, for example, the letters from one font and the numbers from another font displayed into one text field. This is also very useful if your main font does not support certain characters used in a specific language. So the fallback will fetch it from another font and display it live in your text. Just a quick example. I have one here, just to give you an idea. Say I have two different fonts being shown in the same text object. But it doesn't have to be all characters. TextMesh Pro supports sprites as well, as you can see. This is especially useful if you want inline images in your text to display emojis, custom controls, or even in-game currencies for your game. And you can even animate them when it plays. Wow, okay. There you go. Thank you. All right. And speaking of animation, let me show you another example here. You can animate most of TextMesh Pro's properties through its API. And here I will zoom back in so you can see better. There you go. Here we're animating the max visible characters to progressively display text, like you would use in an RPG or any other narrative-driven game. It's very efficient because it's not reparsing the string or rebuilding the layout. There's no allocation being done by string concatenation. This is one entire text block which is assigned only once at initialization. So it's very performant. All right, so that's it for the demos. Let me go back. And let's talk about some of the most important features coming ahead. The team is working on a complete rewrite of the text system, which enables some very substantial improvements. The font asset generator, for one, is also being completely rewritten. When creating your font assets in the editor, right now, it can take a few minutes, to be gentle. And now with the new text engine, it's going to take only a few seconds. It's actually very mind-blowing. It's so fast, in fact, that we can now use it during runtime to generate glyphs. So if you have input fields in your app and some user types some unexpected characters, the dynamic system will pick them up and generate them on the fly. We call it hybrid because we still recommend making static font atlas for the characters you know will be used in your app. This is always be the more performant way of creating font assets. This is actually one of the most requested features. The new text system will support open type layout features, such as ligatures, positional forms, and alternates. And what's exciting about those is they are essential to finally have support for non-Latin languages and write support for emojis. And in the future, we will stop supporting the existing Unity text components. They will actually be replaced by the TextMesh Pro components, but they will be fully integrated into Unity, so everyone can benefit from it. And we like sign distant fields so much, we're planning to integrate it into the Unity editor itself, so even it can have great looking text. So, why should you consider TextMesh Pro for your next project? We believe it solves the hard problems related to text. I mean, it offers great text rendering at no performance cost. It gives you unparalleled control over style, format, and layout of your text. And with features like material presets and font fallbacks, it's much easier to manage and organize the fonts in your project. How to get it? Right now, you can download TextMesh Pro for free on the Asset Store. And if you're using Unity 2018.1 and over, you can simply install it via the Unity Package Manager, which we probably heard about. We really recommend using that version. Has many advantages. First, it gives you access to the source code, pretty useful. And all the future upgrades will be much smoother. But if you want to replace the asset store version you currently have in your project, you're going to have to do a one-time operation of converting all the GeoID in your project. So there's a tool supplied with TextMesh Pro. It comes with it. You have to run it only once. But please always back up your project first, even if it's going to work. You never know when you're going to have a bad surprise. And if you want to know more about TextMesh Pro, it comes packed with a lot of examples. Actually, I shamelessly use some of them during the demo. There's tons of them. You can learn a lot just by playing with them. There's also a lot of tutorials you can find on YouTube made by Stefan, who is the original creator of TextMesh Pro. They cover a lot of the features. And you can always visit the user forums. Your feedback is always very important. It's actually been driving this current feature set. So try it out and let us know what you think. Thursday morning, I'll be at the Meet the Devs kiosk on the show floor. With me will be Audrey. She's a software developer working on TextMesh Pro in Montreal. She'll be able to answer any more technical questions you may have. And if you want a sneak peek at some upcoming Unity features, I have other demos about UI elements and vector graphics. So I really hope to see you there. That's actually all I have for you today. So thank you very much. You can also have a Q&A if you have any questions. We have mics on the left and on the right. Sure, go ahead. I don't see much, sorry.
Okay. I have two questions. We've been using TextMesh Pro for some projects and not for other projects for a few specific reasons. And I was wondering, I actually saw one of them came up as an upcoming feature, is that right now we have a mobile app in which we fear that for localization purposes, like the Asian languages, they have so many characters that you can't really. You could pack most of them, but a user could always use a player name, for instance, that is a character that we don't have. Would the dynamic on runtime system solve that issue?
Yeah, it's a great case, especially if you're using Chinese languages, for example. There's 55,000 kilos or whatever. Yeah. But only like 1,500 are the most commonly used. So basically, you could only deal with them. Or even even reduce, and if there's some characters that pops up that are not covered with that asset, they will be rendered on the fly, no problem at all. So that's one of the most use case.
Okay, that's awesome. And the second reason was basically one of the games uses a text font which overlays characters a lot on top of each other to have like this cartoony effect. And basically with the current outlines, for instance, they are based on a per character effect, and we would that results in the black outline covering other characters, and we would love to have the ability to do that per word basis, for instance, to solve such issues. Because right now we have to use, if we would want to do that, we have to use one TextMesh Pro for the normal text and one below the hierarchy for the outline text,
which is
and
sad.
that removes the performance.
I'll make sure that the team knows about that. I'm not aware of anything planned for that, but it's a very good case.
Okay, that would be really awesome.
Take note. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the talk. I saw earlier in one of your in one of the demos that the TextMesh Pro also had an SDF atlas, and because you said in the beginning that it was not a bitmap font, but I wanted to ask what the atlas is.
So TextMesh Pro, the SDF does require a font atlas, but it's not a regular atlas unlike a bitmap, where it's basically recording the information of the glyphs and the transparency. The SDF font atlas is used to calculate the shapes that used by the shaders to draw the lines. So you have one font atlas, but only one for all the resolutions.
All right. Okay, so it is scaling up to high resolutions, which was the reason why we, for example, used still the dynamic fonts from Unity. If you just blow it to 200 pixels, it's still look good. But that's the case with TextMesh Pro as well.
Yes.
Alrighty. Cool.
But yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand though your.
Well, it sounded like there is an atlas, and an atlas had a finite size.
Yes.
So if and I always understood the Unity native old legacy font system to use dynamic font asset like Arial.ttf, which then would generate it on the fly. So I always thought,
but that would be like incredibly not performant to regenerate the asset on real-time. Whether SDF does not do that. You generate it once, and then it uses it to calculate how to render the font.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
You mentioned about animation in the upcoming features. Is that something which will be accessible only at API level, or there will be an integration with timeline or something like that?
Well, animation per se is not a feature. It's something you can do by using the API and changing properties. But we don't have any animation support, if you will, for TextMesh Pro. But I'm guessing through timeline, could you probably keyframe properties of a text field, but not the ones you would have like in the style tags, for example. So. Okay. Yeah, maybe there's room to improve.
Like what actually key featureable or keyframeable features you would have in a way, but I think it's a matter of.
No, that's great feedback. I'll bring it up.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. I've been working with TextMesh Pro already like for a year or something, and my questions is a little bit specific because I'm enjoying like all the benefits I got from the TextMesh Pro. I'm your UX designer, but at the same time, for example, for the case when the text, the size of the text also has to be dependent on the size of the background. Actually, the opposite. But I also want, for example, to restrict it when I reach the special amount of pixels. I have to use a layout group in Unity, and layout group doesn't have the maximum width. And to actually make it happen, I need to create a really difficult setup where, like, I have an empty game object as a parent, and then I have to use a content size filter and some other tricks to make it happen, and also truncate as like one line in TextMesh Pro. Maybe it will be actually very like useful for like designers like me to have like a maximum size of the text box or a minimum size of the text box, because when I start to mess up with Unity layout group, which doesn't like provide functionality I really need, maybe it would be possible to do it with the TextMesh Pro.
So in this case, the auto size is not helping you at all in this case?
Oh, no. The thing is, I have a text.
Yes.
And I need it, for example, with like localization. Sometimes it changes. Also change the size of the background. But when it reaches a special amount of pixels, I need fonts to shrink and shrink the font size, because I don't want it to grow like infinitely. But I can't do it with a simple setup. I need to kind of use some like tricks.
Thursday morning, if you're available and you come at the meet the devs, maybe we can look at it.
Yeah.
Do you have a sample project?
I'm leaving like tomorrow, but yeah, maybe
or
I
after.
can catch you up.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
You said that there will be less quads, which will give better performance, but how about pixel shading? How heavy is it to render the TextMesh quads compared to a normal font quad?
The numbers I have is 5 to 10 times more performant. These are very optimized shaders, and we have different shaders for mobile and more advanced feature set. So if you need performance for mobile device, for example, the supplied shader for mobile should be performant enough. That's actually very, very optimized.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Actually, I ignore this side. No more? No? We're good? Well, another one.
One more question about the topic that you said is going to happen.
Sorry, can you?
If you're going to replace the old Unity text with TextMesh Pro, does it mean that all the scripts that Unity currently has, that has placeholders for text component, is going to be switched to TextMesh Pro font, or how that's going to work?
We're not at the step where we are planning how the conversion will happen. I'm guessing legacy the TextMesh Pro will not go anywhere, so you probably still be able to use it. So in a project, we probably have to think about a conversion tool or some sort. But it's a very good point.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else? Last call. All right. Well, thank you very much.